Yeah, I don't know if we're live yet.
There's somebody new doing it now, so it might not work the same way.
Yeah, he came in earlier. Joseph, is there any way to know if we're live or not yet? Because I would hate to not do it.
I can see us on the other TV that's facing out. So
Yeah, well, that's what I think.
Yeah, the one that's facing out.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Is there a live stream?
The last thing I want to do is.
But it just now switched to us in there.
Okay, we're good.
We're good.
All righty, then we'll call this meeting to order. The board does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following a public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variances. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variances. Please note that any order of the board is valid for a period of 1 year. If one would like to request the board table or adjourn their case due to the absence of a full board, which tonight we're down 1 board member, you must inform the chairperson immediately after the public hearing. Petitioners shall do their best to limit presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in a public hearing shall do their best to limit comments to 3 minutes. All righty. As said, we are down 1 board member. That's just Ms. Robinson. The approval of minutes, is there any modification and or, yes, Mr. Clay?
Make a motion to approve.
And Mr. Gavin seconds, all right. Any comments? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. We'll move on to unfinished business. There is none. So then we will move on to new business. You are, unfortunately, you are out of order. You're unfortunately out of order. We have to go by the order agenda. You're out of order. Sir, please sit down.
Well, I
Mr.
just want to point out,
please.
my request was to be under unfinished business, and the board hasn't addressed my request.
Thank you. All right. New business, case number 24-07-22 for 319 South Main Street. Whenever you are ready, you may take it away.
Thank you. The subject site is located on the east side of South Main Street between East 3rd and 4th Streets, and it's located within the Central Business District zoning district. And the site contains a 1,570 square foot single-story commercial building, which is occupied by a vitamin and supplement retailer, and the petitioner is proposing to convert it into a tattoo studio. Now, tattoo studios are identified within the zoning ordinance to be an adult-oriented business, which of course is not permitted in the Central Business District. So the petitioner is therefore seeking a use variance to allow that use at this site. The zoning ordinance also identifies specific placement standards for adult-oriented businesses. One such of those placement standards is that they're not allowed to be placed within 1,000 feet of any other existing regulated use. Within 1,000 feet of the site, there are several other known existing regulated uses, and the closest is Terra Nest LLC, which offers massage therapy services, which is located across the street approximately 100 feet away. So the petitioner is seeking a second variance to waive 900 feet of the minimum required 1,000 foot distance from an existing regulated use. The use must also be located at least 1,000 feet away from a school, library, park, playground, licensed child care center, or a religious institution. So among those listed uses, Centennial Commons Park is located closest to the site, approximately 300 feet away. So the petitioner is seeking a third variance to waive 700 feet of the minimum required 1,000 foot distance from a school, library, park, playground, licensed daycare facility, or religious institution. Thank you.
All right, any questions for staff? All right, seeing none. Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead,
just,
yes.
this is a really more of a procedural question.
Yes.
Obviously, there are two variances on there, so one has to be a use, so it's minimum of 6,
Correct.
and the other one has to be a minimum of 5, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, just confirming.
Yep, no problem. All right, if the petitioner is present, you may come forward and state your case.
So, I'm Mark ZBA. I am the person trying to get a maple tattoo in Royal Oak. I've never done one of these before, so excuse me, I don't really know exactly
That's okay.
what the whole deal is, but I think that tattooing is an industry that has evolved a lot. We've been operating in the New Center neighborhood of Detroit for the last 6 years. I've been looking to move to Royal Oak because most of our clientele comes from the greater Oakland County area here and all the cities surrounding it. Also, we have people traveling from all over the country to come to our shop in Detroit right now, so I think it'll bring a lot of business and people from all over the place to come to the city and have a clean, safe space to get tattooed. I don't think, sometimes I find it kind of silly that it's like with sex shops and things like that, but that is what it is, But anyway, I mean, I really just want to bring a safe, creative, cool business to the city that will, be a place where people can go get tattoos. I don't know if there's anything I specifically need to address, I suppose. I know that there is another tattoo parlor that opened, I believe, 2 years ago on 4th Street, and it's about 6 blocks away. So I know that they also were given some sort of use variance on that space as well. So maybe if that helps my case.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner? Mr. Gavin?
More just out of curiosity, because it doesn't really matter for the decision tonight, but are you moving or are you opening a second location?
I'm moving, yeah. So I'm closing my current location and moving to Royal Oak. I think there's just more liveliness and
Thanks.
young people around, yeah.
Any other questions? Ms. Zuki?
What is your plan for window design?
So I'm working with the businesses next door to me too, kind of showing them some plans as well. I'm planning on doing a sign above. So I know Michigan Nutrition had like a big bulky sign up top. I think I'm gonna do like a hand painted sign with like gooseneck lights coming down, and then I'm gonna have some, I have a sign painter that comes out and hand paints the windows. He's coming here from Seattle. But it's going to be very tasteful, nothing crazy, just like logos for the business. Our shop has always been kind of like old school themed, so it'll look like very classic is kind of the look that we're going for. I'm also aware that there's some programs to help us like put some extra money towards the front of the business I've been made aware of. So I'm trying to really make the front of the store really pretty, and I'm putting a lot of work into it is my plan.
Will you be able to see people being tattooed from the street?
No. I mean, if you came up to the window and kind of looked in, possibly. But we can also, there's really easy ways for us to like create barriers. Like normally we have like a bar with like a curtain, exactly. So like, especially if we're tattooing somebody's forearm, there's already a front counter. So you kind of have to like get up to look down past the area. But if we're tattooing anybody in like a more sensitive area, we always put up blinders or have blinds that cover everything behind the front counter, essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Wolf?
Just a quick procedural question. I'm assuming with your signs, the city is aware of what you want to do. You're obviously going through the
Yeah.
city's procedures for that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm applying and making sure I'm giving all my plans to the city before I do anything. But yeah, I've just been waiting to kind of get through this step because this is kind of like, before I kind of deep dive into everything else. So yeah. But yeah, I'm planning on following all city guidelines to the utmost and making sure everything's good to go.
Any other
Can I
questions?
ask a question of staff, or is it too late for that?
No, you can go.
So this is more for Alex. Do they have to go, after this, would they have to get like a special use permit or something along those lines?
If the board were to approve all the variants listed tonight, they could apply for their building permits to establish the use at this location. Further use, site plan review by the planning commission wouldn't be necessary.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions?
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
So were you saying if this does get approved, there's another thing I have to do outside of like submitting floor plans and stuff like that to the city?
Yeah, the next step hypothetically would be to apply for any applicable building permits.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll open up public comment afterwards. I'll ask you if you want us to proceed because we are down one board member. And as stated, you need 6 affirmative to pass the use variance. And there's no guarantee that we'll have a full board next month. So I'll just ask you at the end of public comment, and you can say, yes, please proceed, or please adjourn until next month. So you don't have to tell me right now. You can just wait till after public comment.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You want to take a seat or stay?
Yep, go, feel free to sit
Thank you.
down. Is there anyone to speak on this case for public comment, for this case? Okay, then come forward.
Charles Simchina. I'd like to read something that I think is important for this case, and that I think has been forgotten a little bit by the City Commission, Planning Commission, DDA, and after watching the video of last month's zoning board meeting, I think it's been forgotten. It's one of our foundational elements in our society called the rule of law. And the definition of the rule of law is it's a political ideal that all citizens and institutions within a country, a state, or community are accountable to the same laws, including lawmakers and leaders. It prevents the arbitrary use of power and supports the equality of all citizens before the law. It also delivers 4 universal principles: accountability, just law, open government, and accessible and impartial justice. The rule of law is sometimes stated simply as no one is above the law. And you have a law in front of you with this adult business ordinance that was requested by the business community in the Central Business District years ago. The City Commission approved this law. There is a reason for this law, and it's because there are certain age-restricted businesses that sometimes can have a negative impact on the community and on minors. But the primary purpose is not to allow these businesses to cluster together in a concentrated area. That's what the real purpose of this law is. There was a tendency in the past for multiple applications for these types of businesses to try to come into the central business districts and in other parts of the city and cluster together. So there's rules to keep them farther apart from each other and from residents or places where children might frequent. I don't know if you recall something in Boston called the combat zone, but that was an area that got blighted and destroyed by a cluster of adult-themed businesses. Crime rates went up, and other businesses that were legitimate and didn't cause problems went out of business. That's what the fear was. So there's a rule of law that was passed. There's an entire book of a three-ring binder with authoritative studies that supported this type of ordinance so that these types of businesses would not be clustered together. That's why it's a part of the zoning ordinance now. And there's no evidence that any of these criteria for any of these variances have been presented. This board should deny the variance.
Anyone else to speak on this case, please come forward.
Hi, my name's Sean, we're a resident of Royal Oak. I'm going to comment on this and then a few other stuff because I got to leave early tonight. I want to go to the summer concert series. First, I support this. I think calling a tattoo parlor an adult business is a little outdated, especially in today's day and age. I have so many people, especially around my age, have tattoos. A lot of teenagers now have tattoos. I think it's a fine application, and it sounds like you're going to bring a lot of business to Royal Oak, which is, I think, something that we should appreciate. So I'm in support of that. Getting into my other comments, I see the master plan draft was just released. I hope this board is in support of that. I appreciate the master plan's recognition that we need more and different types of housing, and I hope that's something that this board will support, as well as more uniform zoning codes. So, we don't have to keep coming back before the board to get changes and things like that. This next part, at first I want to say I do appreciate the work that you all do. Like, you're all citizens. You have to sit here. It's easy to be me and give comments, but you guys actually got to sit here and go through the whole meeting. I did want to say last meeting I did attend some things that concerned me, and I just wanted to point it out. There was a family here that was applying for get a variance to add an addition on their house. It was denied. I did want to note, none of you gave really any specifics as to what the person needed to do to get your approval or what could be changed. There was a lot of vague language of what they might do, and then it was denied. And so my concern is, let's say, I most likely will probably have to move if I want to expand my family or my mom wants to live with me. But let's say if I wanted to add an addition to my house, what they did there is they got their application denied, and now they didn't get any direction from the board, and so now they're just going to have to guess what's the size that you guys might want, and then they'll have to come back again and see if it works. They didn't get any direction from y'all. There was also some comments about it not fitting the character of the neighborhood. Again, that's an aesthetic. Like, we need some more guidance there, because again, they're gonna have to guess now to see what you guys want and then come back before the board. That was just something that, again, I respect. Like, you guys are citizens, I get it. But they're spending money on that project, right? They should at least get some specifics from the board as to, okay, if this was too big, what would we support, right? And before, so they don't have to guess and come back out and get denied, what actually you guys want. Again, it just frightened me a little as somebody who is a homeowner, somebody who might want to make changes to my house. I appreciate at least more specifics and guidance from the board so that I don't get denied and just have to guess, what you guys might want in the future. Again, I appreciate the work that you all do. I get that this is difficult. You guys got to be here the whole night. I don't, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment on this case only, please? Yes, you may come forward.
Good evening. My name is Trish Oliver. I've been a Royal Oak resident for almost 40 years. I appreciated Mr. Semchina's comments about the rule of law. I think one important factor of the rule of law is that it makes a level playing field with fairness for all involved. One thing that I really appreciate about it is that its intention is to protect our children and our youth until they're a little bit older and they can make a long-term decision that they can't reverse. I would ask our kind petitioner to perhaps look for another location that will not require a variance. And then I think we have a win-win with our community and also with the business owner. So thank you for his interest in Royal Oak, and I would kindly ask him to consider to find a location where a variance doesn't need to be granted. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Katie Knorr. I own the Give Thanks Bakery, which is located adjacent to this property in question at 319, what is my address? 319 South Main. We share a roof and a landlord with the building that is being discussed right now that the petitioner is making an application for. I just wanted to come forward as a mother of 5 children and as a resident of Royal Oak and a business owner to say that I support the adoption of this variance. I do not view that this business in question is fairly categorized as an adult business. I do not see it as posing risk to young people. I think conducted appropriately, safely, and judiciously. I've had a conversation with the petitioner, and I feel assured that that is his intent. He appears to be a high-class artist of this nature, and I do believe that this categorization of body art as adult is outdated. It's very clear as a parent of young children that the application of tattoos has evolved a lot in the last 10 years, and it appeals to a much wider audience than it did perhaps several decades ago. So I would encourage you to adopt this variance and allow this petitioner to bring his line of business into our main street. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this case? All right, going once, going twice. All right, public comment on this case is closed. Sir, would you like us to proceed, or would you like us to adjourn till next month? Okay, proceed. So we'll go to this side of the board. Motions and/or discussions. Mr. Klatt.
Just a quick question for Alex or maybe Mr. Murphy, and I have no idea if you have the answer to this, but it was suggested that when these businesses congregate, it could bring, bad things or criminal activity. Are we aware of any police reports or anything along those lines associated with that tattoo parlor at 4th and Lafayette? Any issues, any problems?
I do not have any knowledge of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, Mr. Wolf?
So I actually want to take each one separately. So I'm actually going to make a motion to approve the use variance first. I think that this is not the first tattoo parlor in the area. I think whether or not that we like it, there are other such ones in the area. And again, to our knowledge, there hasn't been any public safety issue or any kind. And I'm convinced that the applicant will follow, all the rules that the city and any other jurisdiction puts together. So I also went by the area, and that building will be vacant as of August 1st. It says so right on the front of the sign. So the more, or let me rephrase, the fewer empty storefronts we can have on Main Street, the better. So I'm gonna.
May I suggest also that if you think you're in favor of the second portion, to just group it together and let's try for both together. And if it doesn't pass, then we'll try separate.
Okay, yeah, then I'll also make a motion to approve the non-use variance as well.
Okay.
Just a point of clarity, because I would like to support this, but there are actually 3 variances requested.
Oh, okay, fine, fair enough. Would you like to clean up your motion?
I would like to clean up my motion and make a motion to approve all variances that are in front of us.
Is there a second?
I will support.
Okay. Go ahead, state with your case.
Again, I just said it, but I think within the other 2, I did walk around the area. I do frequent that area a lot, and I wouldn't even, that 1,000 feet within the library in Centennial Park, you wouldn't even think that there was a couple of tattoo parlors within that 1,000-foot variance as well. There are other religious institutions, one of which I go to, that is also within that, and again, nobody would ever know. So I have no problem supporting this.
Mr. Gavin?
I echo much of the same comments, and on top of that, there's numerous thoughts running through my head. One, I understand the concern some people have and would like to see properties like this or uses like this located elsewhere. But having worked as a city attorney before and having seen adult use ordinances and like city maps showing where uses where in a city there's like more than 1,000-foot distance from any of those uses, and given the number of parks that we have here in Oak Park or Royal Oak, it's just I just find it hard to believe that there's really much of anywhere in the city that could possibly meet that definition. It's very restrictive, especially given the change in the industry with tattoos and how widely accepted they are nowadays. So given that and the fact that these are legitimate businesses that are run by artists who are highly skilled at their craft, I just really have a lot of support for this type of stuff. So with that, it's just, I view personally the practical difficulty of this, or is it a hardship when it's considered for use variances, whichever it is, that it's the classification itself as an adult-oriented business for the tattoos. So I am fully in support of granting this variance.
Okay, I know I saw Mr. Klatt, Mr. Moore, and over here. Yes.
I'll be in support as well. And I was on the board when we approved the tattoo parlor at 4th and Lafayette, and I voted to approve that as well. And I think the stigma or the narrative surrounding tattoo parlors has changed over the years. Since the ordinance was originally written, it's become more of a social norm and it's more accepted. It doesn't bring the bad element. That's why I asked that question to Alex, in my opinion at least. So, as was mentioned, they're quite common these days.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I just want to say I too was on the board when the one on 4th Street was approved, and I spent a lot of time in that area, and it appears to be a very well-run establishment. I don't see any criminal activity hanging around there or anything like that, so I'm, fairly confident that this will be the same kind of place, so.
Mr. Lineweber?
It may, I'm sure it's a generational thing, but, I see the rationale at the time that the ordinance was written for the, selective businesses to be regulated in this way or to go through this type of process. The question I have maybe for Alex would be the variance, if it's approved, does that stick with the property, or does that, if the applicant sold the business in 3 years or something changed, what would happen with the variance?
If the property owner or the business owner wanted to change hands and transfer ownership to a new owner, staff would be willing to apply the variance if it were granted tonight to any future business, granted they were, doing the same operation.
But it does not come back in front of a body such as this for approval or a necessary regular renewal of the licensing required?
No.
Mr. Gavin?
Just to follow up on that question, since that was a talk about transfer of ownership, if the use itself were to change, say this business closed down 10 years from now, would somebody else be able to open a tattoo parlor in the same place, or would they have to then apply for a different variant, another variance, because it's a different person with a different use?
Yes, and the zoning ordinance does identify, potential non-conforming uses, and it says that if it was closed down for more than a period of 1 year, then at that point, let's say, like you said, if it was closed for 10 years, there may have been a few different uses at that location since then. And at that point, any future proprietor that wanted to open up, this type of business, then at that point, they would have to apply for a use variance.
Thanks.
Ms. Zukin?
Just to clarify, Alex, can a subsequent owner operate any kind of adult business there, or would it be limited to tattoo?
It would be limited to this particular business, so it would be the tattoo, yes.
Any other questions? Mr. Lineweber?
Sorry to add on, the representation of the quality of the space and the treatment of the windows and that kind of a thing. I don't necessarily see anything in the information that was presented that showed that information. Is there any ability for subsequent review or to make sure that an applicant fulfills the promises made today on something like this?
That would be subject to the review by the building division as part of their building permits. It wouldn't necessarily be reviewed by the planning division as part of the zoning board of appeals as it pertains to this variance.
Okay. Just in general, I'm skeptical of this use variance. Thank you.
Did you have another comment, Mr.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up, Alex. I don't expect you to have the answer to this, but does the building division, let me rephrase, does the building code have a provision for something like a barrier or something along those lines?
Well, the state building code is separate from the city's zoning ordinance, so I would have to defer that to, the building department specifically. That wouldn't necessarily relate to the variances listed in your report.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Any other comments?
I've got more, sorry.
That's fine, Mr. Lineweber, go ahead.
The use is permitted at this site at this time. There are other uses permitted. It's just this use in particular that we're discussing. Are there other locations in the city that this use is permitted?
Under the current zoning ordinance, the only location, or zoning district rather, where adult-oriented businesses are allowed is in the general business district, and it's permitted as a special land use, but the same placement standards would still apply. So that would be the 1,000-foot buffer from, the playground or schools, and also the 1,000-foot buffer from any other existing regulated use as well.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd just like to remind the board if they could consider going over the elements for a use and non-use variance prior to voting.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone want to swing at that? Mr. Gavin, Mr. Wolf, since you...
So would you like us to read out what the recommend?
Mr. Gavin, he'll do that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought that's you.
Yeah, I was going to go over them, but
Yeah.
so for the use variances, the various factors that we have to consider are first, that the property could not be reasonably used for the purposes permitted in that zone. I understand that one would be all but impossible to pass if it was interpreted to say, like, well, there's currently I'm sorry, I hit my microphone. There's currently a vitamin supplement placed there, so clearly there are other reasonable uses for that space. However, I don't read that as trying to restrict this entirely. For me personally, I view that as it's going to end up being a vacancy. We've got a tenant ready to move in, and it's a use that I think should be permitted in that zone under my beliefs. So the next factor, the appeal results from unique circumstances peculiar to that property and not in general neighborhood conditions. So unique circumstances are that with respect to that property, it's in the downtown district, which is highly desirable area to move into. In addition to that, there are multiple other uses that are all very dense in there. So I view this as affecting this particular property in a peculiar way, given the nature of that. The use requested by the variance would not alter the essential character of the area. I do not believe that it would. We even have neighboring business owners that came and commented on that and were in support of this. The alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I view the classification as an adult-oriented business as a hardship in and of itself. And then with respect to the use will preserve a substantial property right possessed by other property owners in the same zone, I don't think this will impact in any way the other property owners or tenants in that area. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the neighboring property owner or business owner came and was testifying in support of this. So those are with the respect to the use variances. For the non-use variances, which are relating to the distance from other regulated uses and from parks and things like that, as well as, what was the other one?
Churches and...
Yes, yep. So with respect to that one...
Schools, libraries.
Chapters, restrictions unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. I think this was... I essentially covered this in my earlier discussion. I think that should be a purpose that is permitted in that zone. And I think it unreasonably prevents the applicant from doing so. The variance will do substantial justice to the applicant as well as to the other property owners in the district. As noted above, we have a neighboring business owner who testified in support of it. And it will, I believe, will do substantial justice to other owners in the area. Lesser relaxation than that requested would not give substantial relief to the owner of the property or be more consistent with justice to other property owners. This is a binary. It's either he's in or he's out. So I don't see a lesser relaxation would allow it. I mean, in that vein, no, there's no lesser relaxation that we could do that would give relief. The plight of the landowner is due to unique circumstances of the property. I discussed that above. And then the alleged hardship was not created by any person presently having a property interest or an interest in the property. And I also discussed that above. So there you go.
Any other additions? No? Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Reddy?
I just wanted to make a comment in general regarding the concerns about the rule of law, which are important concerns. I would just like to say that our board is empowered by state law, specifically to hear cases like this, where if the zoning ordinance were strictly enforced, there would be a hardship or practical difficulty. That's the whole point of our board, and it was empowered by state law. So just wanted to address that concern.
Is there any other comments? Ms. Sukin?
I'll throw another 2 cents in. Looking at the rule of law, if you read the definitions of adult-oriented commercial as laid out by the ordinance, it says it's recognized there are some uses which, because of their very nature, have operational characteristics that have a serious and deleterious impact upon residential, office, and commercial areas. That may have been true 20, 30 years ago. I don't think that applies to tattoo parlors any longer. It's a very accepted art form in almost every community. So I don't think that this ordinance should be strictly applied to this type of business any longer.
Okay. I also agree with the variances and what everyone stated. We've had example of a tattoo parlor that's real close to a school and a church right there in Washington that's been there for decades. There's been no detriment there. We haven't. I could understand if we're starting to get a congregation of, say, 5 or more tattoo parlors in the central business district. Okay, now we're starting to get maybe too many for sure, but one on Main Street, one on Washington, one on 4th, which is a little bit farther away than all of them. I don't feel like we're overabundance of tattoo parlors if we granted this, that there would be an issue. And this being on Main Street, that's a very high rent area, so I cannot imagine that he's going to go in and lowball everything to how he sets it up, because he's not going to get any business that way. He's a smart businessman, and I got to imagine he knows exactly what he's doing coming here, picking that location, that prime real estate location. So I'm pretty sure his business will be rather respectable. I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm right. But I believe, as stated, the hardship is the fact of how tattoo parlors have been still left behind back in the 70s, state of mind, I'll say, of when the times were a little bit rougher. Nowadays, yeah, you're in the minority if you don't have a tattoo, unfortunately, it seems like. And I don't have a tattoo, so I'm in the minority. So with that, if there's no other discussion, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye. All right, opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries. Congratulations. Best luck to you, sir. We will move on to case number. Please silence your cell phone. Thank you. I hate the fact that we do not have any bookmarks on this. All right. Case number 2407-23, 30333, Woodward Avenue. Whenever you're ready, you may take it away.
Thank you. The subject site is located on the west side of Woodward Avenue within the general business zoning district. It has a total parcel width of 40 feet, a depth of 80 feet, and the total lot area is 3,200 square feet. It is partially developed, with half of the site being a 2-story building, which at one point was occupied by an insurance office, and then the other half is vacant land. The petitioner is proposing to demolish the existing building and construct a new 2-story mixed-use building with 2 separate ground floor restaurant tenant spaces and 1 second-story tenant space, which was identified as being an office use. That has an outdoor balcony area, which is along the east facade and fronts onto Woodward Avenue. Restaurants are required to provide at least one parking space for every 65 square feet of usable floor area. And the 2 ground floor units were calculated to have 1,433.38 and 1,322.25 square feet of usable floor area respectively. So those 2 ground floor tenant spaces would require a combined total of 43 off-street parking spaces. Office uses are parking are assessed at 1 space for every 225 square feet of usable floor area, and that would contain approximately 2,723.05 square feet of usable floor area. So that would require an additional 13 off-street parking spaces. So altogether combined, the building would require a minimum of 56 off-street parking spaces. The site plan, as shown, provides 1 parking space at the rear of the building, which is accessed from the rear public alley behind. And one other thing I would like to point out is that the adjacent parking lots, both behind the buildings, are not owned by the petitioner, so therefore they cannot be counted in the petitioner's parking calculations. In addition to that, these parking spaces in front of the building, which run adjacent to Woodward Avenue, are actually within the state's right-of-way. So those also cannot be counted. Now, future patrons of the businesses that could be located there could always park there, but these spaces themselves are not owned by any one private entity. So with that being said, the petitioner is seeking a variance to waive 55 of the minimum required 56 off-street parking spaces. If the variances are approved tonight, the next step would be for the petitioner to apply to the Planning Commission for site plan approval. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Mr. Klatt?
Alex, maybe I missed this. The plans in the packet didn't really call for a restaurant. It just showed open space. Is it worst case scenario? Do you look at when you come up with the parking?
On the right-hand side, they do identify the 2 ground floor tenants to be restaurant and ice cream. Now, of course, ice cream, that's not necessarily, on face value, an ice cream parlor may not necessarily be correlated as like a traditional sit-down restaurant, but staff would still consider that to be the same in terms of parking calculations.
Sorry, I must have missed that. And I know you mentioned the parking behind the space to the east, or
Yes.
to the west. In this case, do we know, are there any, who is that parking for? Is there a certain building that owns that lot? Are they at max capacity? Are there any leases associated with that? Are we aware of that?
If you look at my computer, I believe this asphalt parking space is owned by the Cult Center to the south. And I believe this parking area, as well as this parking behind, is owned by the commercial building to the north.
Can I respond to?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, just to quickly respond, I went out there, Mr. Klatt, it is very clearly marked that this is owned by the center to the south, and it's very clearly marked in multiple spaces that that parking lot can only be used for people using that building. So it's very clearly spec there.
Yeah. Other questions for staff? All right, seeing none, if the petitioner, Mr. Reddy.
I just had a small question. It said that the petitioner would have to revise their site plan with a van accessible or barrier-free parking space. So the one that we see is not. I guess would they? So they'll revise it, but they won't have to come back before us if we grant it. Okay.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Moore?
So looking at the way that the drive is configured on that, what I call the MDOT parking, it doesn't look as though there's even spaces in front of where this building will be. Is that a correct assessment? Like with the drive there wouldn't be able to even have 2 spots there, right?
Are you referring in front of the building or
yeah,
behind
like
the
in
building?
front of where the building will be. Will there be any parking spots there? Because it appears to kind of end, like almost in between the 2 buildings. So I don't think if you're going like where you're showing, if you go to the left, there would not be any additional parking spaces that would be in front of this proposed building.
Yeah, and then the other thing
Is
I
that
would again
correct?
point out is that these parking spaces are within the Woodward Avenue right-of-way. So those would actually be subject to MDOT as opposed to any one private entity.
Okay, because I was just, looking at the configuration of it, it doesn't look like you could even get through there if there were additional spots there. So I was just trying to determine how many spots were there, and then, there's neighboring businesses as well. But I think you've answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Once? Twice? All right. Petitioner is present. Please come forward and present your case.
How you doing? My name is Jamal Safadine, and I'm the person petitioning this property. So to kind of clarify the restaurant portion of it, it's not really a restaurant. We're talking to Cinnabon and Aunt Annie's, and there would be no tables inside, because that's kind of what we went over with the city before we did this, is that any seating would cause more need for parking. So it would, if any type of food would be in there, it would have to be something to grab and go. So that's kind of where we were going with it. It would be a Cinnabon Aunt Annie's downstairs. And the upstairs would be a private office for myself and my insurance, which the sign on there right now is my insurance. It was actually, I think it was called Rockstar Guitar before or something. It was a guitar place, and I think they lived upstairs. So it's going to be 3 employees who are going to take up the upstairs. But I actually, if you go back to the picture for that Walt Center parking, so that we can cover at least 5 employees downstairs and then 3 employees upstairs plus 2 visitors if we ever had for the office. We were going to lease 10 spots in that back corner so that it wouldn't bother his parking lot. So it would be that back wall, if you could see it like the furthest, so it wouldn't bother anybody. And then there's like 2 spots in front of the door, if you can see already right here. Over there where the second part of the building would be, there you can't, because if you backed up, it would be right to where people are exiting. But in the back of the building, there's supposed to be 4 parking spots. I'm not sure why I only drew 1. But that would we figured it would have gave us 6 to 8 spots that people can pull in, get what they want from downstairs and leave, and which it shouldn't be that busy to where it should take up where you need 10, 15 spots or 20 spots if there was indoor seating. But I mean, that's what we're asking for now. Obviously, if it came to not being a restaurant or some other type of use, I mean, it's still, I think that would drop the parking spot variance down. But I mean, we were just trying to figure, we knew who we were in talks with already, so we figured we'd ask for that from the start and then just kind of see where it went from there.
All right. Questions for the petitioner? All right, Mr. Gavin.
So I know on the back you said you only show the 1, and maybe this might be a question for you, it might be a question for staff. It's also showing a dumpster enclosure, which I'm assuming is the reason why there's only 1 parking spot rather than 4.
So I think when we put that in the drawing, it was before we kind of talked to the whole next door, and we were working out so that, because there's actually, right behind that, there's 2 dumpsters.
Okay.
And it's for the 2 neighboring buildings. So we actually talked to the next door and said, can we just pay for an extra pickup for you guys and just kind of share the dumpster space? That way we can add 3 more parking spots, would make a big difference. Okay. And they agreed. As long as we did the whole parking deal, it was kind of like, we could figure that out.
Okay, that helps clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Reddy, I think I saw your hand, and then Mr. Klatt.
I'm sorry, do you have an agreement for the other spots? Or that it's just something you're going to ask for?
For which, the 10 spots?
Yeah.
Oh, it's already been negotiated, but I didn't sign anything because obviously I'd have to get approved first, knowing that there'd only be the 10 spots for employee parking. And then we'd still be using the front kind of, I know it's not city parking, but whatever you would consider that as the come and go spots plus the 4 behind the building.
Okay, so it just wasn't clear to me, where are the 10 spots again?
So if you want to go back to the large parking lot. And in that back corner away from all the buildings, it's kind of behind the other building.
Gotcha.
There's a wall of parking spots that are never touched.
Okay.
So we just figured it doesn't bother the neighboring building, and then It's for employees.
Okay, yeah, so your thought is customers wouldn't come in off of Woodward, they would come off the side street?
Yeah, that would be for employee. I figured if customers came in, it would be the 4 spots behind the building or 2 to 3 spots in front of the building, which the neighboring building's a smoke shop. It's not that busy. I think next door to that is like a pet grooming. So it's kind of, and that's all, like he was saying, the Metro, I'm not sure the exact name for it, but it's not, no one really owns the parking. So there's roughly, I think, 12 spots in front of the building that, I mean, anyone can kind of use. So that's what we figured would be kind of the pull in, grab what you want and go. No seating, obviously.
Mr. Clamp, Mr. Moore, then Mr. Wolf.
You know, Alex, I think I asked this question earlier. Are we aware, I mean, is there any parking available? You know, if they lease 10, will that cause a shortage for the other business that, you know, does their office need all those spaces there? Or has the city done that calculation, or is there any type of calculation for that?
Staff was not made aware of any type of side agreements between the petitioner and any of the other businesses. With that being said, that would have to be done, you know, privately. The city wouldn't get involved in that. And frankly, that really wouldn't change the variances as listed because those parking spaces are not being provided on their own private property.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, then Mr. Wolf.
Yeah, first I'll just say it's dangerous to put a Cinnabon that close to me, but beside the point. So the rear doors I'm having a hard time seeing, those are not going to go like directly into a kitchen space. They're going to be usable by the customers. So there will be something that tells people these 4 spots in front are full, there's 4 more in the back. I mean, how do you plan on managing that?
I'm not sure if you guys, it's, if you go down Woodward, there's a plaza. I don't know if it's considered Birmingham or if it's still Royal Oak, but there's a, what's that sub place called? Jersey Mike's, there's a UPS store, and I think like 2 other tenants. And they have that same upfront parking where obviously they don't own any of it. And in the back, there's the spots right in front of the building. And then the doors are both ways. And then what you do is you put the equipment or the people to one side of the wall.
Okay.
So that way there's a straight walk through. So you can either park behind or park in front. And then you can still access it from either side.
Okay. So it'll be usable, is what you're saying, and
So
they won't
those
have to
doors
walk
aren't
all the way
just
around.
like for employees to walk out the back
Yeah,
or
well,
walk into
I
the
couldn't
kitchen.
tell because it looked
and
like
you're in a
kitchen
freezer.
spaces or
Yeah.
something there. I was unclear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wolf.
So let's try that. I guess to follow up on Mr. Klatt's question to Alex, is there a way for the city to enforce any kind of deal that is made? Obviously, the city doesn't get involved, but could it be recorded at the clerk's office or something?
No, the city wouldn't enforce a private agreement between their 2 parties.
Okay, and then the second question I have, to just reading the parking ordinance right now, obviously a drive-in restaurant requires 1 parking space for every 200 square feet of usable area, in addition to service stalls. And then for standard and fast food restaurants, it's 1 parking spot for every 65 square feet. So what was the calculation made that got it to 1 for every 225?
1 for every 225 is for office uses. So that would be for the 2nd floor office space.
Okay, so I misread it. Thank you.
Other questions for the petitioner? One thing I'm concerned about, is there not being any accessible parking areas. I feel that, is there any way that you can provide that, whether that be in the back? I know in the front you can't guarantee it, but it is, and I know we can't say you have to, but I'm concerned about that. Is there anything you can alleviate my concerns with that?
So just to speak on what he was saying, that do we know of anyone else? I was even told from here to speak to the neighboring building because I guess he had done it for another neighboring business, which I don't know who it was. I wasn't told that. But that's what made me approach him. So I know his lot is way larger than needed. And on top of it, those offices that he has in his building, I don't think open till past 4 o'clock. So on top of that, and then with the dog grooming and all the other stuff next to us, I mean, up till that afternoon time, it might be a little busier in the front, but from 4 on, I mean, there should be more than ample enough parking for just come and go type situation. No seating, because obviously seating changes everything. It would drastically change parking. But I mean, obviously, I think there's a way through the building code department to do that that we don't do seating, obviously. And then it would just be, so that's why we brought up ice cream, because ice cream, you can come in, get a scoop, go. And then now we've been talking with Cinnabon and Annie, same situation. You'd come in, they heat the roll, you walk out. I mean, the whole process is no more than 10 minutes in and out. So hopefully, if you think of 4 cars even pulling up, which would be nice to have continuously, you shouldn't need 25, 30 spots for that section. You would need more than 6, as long as it's continuously rotating. And the office space, it's not leasing out to any company, it's going to be private use only. So it would be for that exact insurance company up there, which is myself, 1 employee, and my wife comes in and helps every once in a while. And then if 2 people might come in, that's why we were saying 5 cars max we'd need for that upstairs.
And then what would be the hours that you, start to finish, what would be the hours that?
Excuse me, can you turn off your cell phone, please? Thank you. Sorry about that.
So start to finish, what would be the hours that the space would be used?
So office hours would be between 8 and 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and that's just because I stay late some days. I wouldn't expect anyone else to. My one producer, he's out by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, I mean, that's the Annie Cinnabon. I don't know their exact schedule, but I don't believe they ever stay open past 10. I want to believe they even said some locations are 8 p.m., but I don't know the drive in times. Like, I've never operated one, so I don't know if they do have busy mornings or if that is more of everyone gets out of school, 3, 4 o'clock, they go, or after, kids go play sports, vice versa, you go get something before you go home. So I'm not sure the exact timing of what would be busy hours, but I would think it would be later in the afternoon where we should have more parking chances than early in the day between 10 and 2. I don't know about you. I might eat a little extra Cinnabon than other people, but I don't know who's racing there at 10 in the morning to go have sweets. But we could see. I don't know. I think it's good. I believe, talking to them and what they gave us kind of numbers, because we were worried about parking also, because obviously if you want to lease it to someone and they're not doing well because of the parking, they're going to leave. So it's finding something that works on both ends. Obviously the other stuff would be some type of retail that doesn't need parking also, but I mean, that's still an option, but we went with the biggest usage so that we had more than enough if needed.
Yeah, and I guess the question I was more concerned about is I didn't think it was going to be a 24-hour operation, but I wanted to make sure, because there is obviously residential behind there, so that makes me, 8 or 10 o'clock is, I think, pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
I had a quick one for you. You mentioned you talked with Cinnabon and whatnot. So they've had other similar locations, similar setup, similar locations as Suburbia or other places of this setup of worrying about lack of parking, and they don't see an issue with this at all?
Exactly. So that's where we kind of got it from. I guess one of their newer stores was in Dearborn Heights, I think it was, and it was a small vacuum store that they took over, and there was about 6 or 8 spots, and they actually do over $100,000 a month out of that location, and they said their parking's working just fine. So they're satisfied. They said with us, if they can make sure that they have 6 spots, they feel like at any time, just to know that there's 6 spots to be used should be more than enough for them. Because of the in and out, people pulling in, grabbing what they need, and it just kind of go back to the car.
So in other words, probably as long as MDOT doesn't decide to take away the front there, you're probably all right.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Gavin.
Kind of a question more for staff and Alex. And this comes up all the time with Woodward. What uses are there that would meet the parking requirements? I mean, I'm kind of going through the table, and just trying to look and see what has a lower than 1 per 250, requirement. I remember one time recently it was dry cleaners was something that Joseph mentioned, are there any that would fit, like if, with just one parking space? I mean, theoretically, this could be 3 if you have like an accessible one plus 2 more or something like that, but I'm just curious if there's
Yeah, and
anything.
I would say there are not many. Now, if you look at the building in its current configuration, with the one half being built out, I guess hypothetically, if, you know, a new office building wanted to go into that use, you know, we could recognize that as being a continuation of the existing use. So that could be approved administratively without, you know, any further parking variance, or other uses that, you know, have like a less parking standard. So like you had pointed out, like dry cleaners could be one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Clack?
I just wanted to verify, it looks like on Stratford, it's permit parking only. I mean, the big concern is that people flood the residential neighborhoods and park on the streets and disrupt those uses there, but I don't see the same thing over on the other street on Warwick. Are we aware that, is there no parking or permit parking there? I didn't see that.
I wouldn't have that knowledge readily available.
And I guess to argue the parking too, I don't think you don't have to build the entire lot. It's an 80-foot wide lot, right? And you could technically park on a portion of that lot if you didn't build the full width on the first floor at least.
Yeah.
I believe for parking, we need at least 20 for the stall and 20 for a maneuvering lane. So in theory, it's 80 feet deep. You could park a portion of it. So there's ways to park it without just relying on the front of the building and the back of the building.
All right, any other questions?
I guess one last thing I could
Yep.
add too was that the neighboring building to the other side without the parking lot, I want to say when we counted it, there was like 20 spots, and there's 6 different businesses in that building. So there's different businesses that can work with less parking, definitely. I think it's more we want to liven up and make that spot look nice, which, I mean, that building right now looks horrible. And that piece of land right there is used for pretty much the dog care to go to the bathroom. So we're trying to do something nice, obviously, and I don't want that to get lost in it too, where we're actually in the middle of 2 buildings. So if we were on the end cap and we, you know, people would pull right into the street side and just leave their car, kind of get it. But it's like with all those other businesses, I just feel like it would more mesh into one large building actually, and it would have the same, obviously, use they would have to go through, obviously get a C of O for whatever they're going to do inside. So this is kind of just zoning for parking wise, but after that, I think the tenant itself would have to figure out, you know, how to get approved also.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions? All right. As a reminder, we're down 1 board member, so you need 5 affirmative votes. So after public comment, I'll ask you if you want us to proceed or to adjourn to next month where we may or may not have a full board. So you're welcome. All right. Is there anyone to speak on this case? Please come forward at this time. On this case. Is it on this case? Yes. Okay. Then maybe.
Familiar with this area. Grew up right by there. The rule of law that talks about the arbitrary use of power is a powerful concept. That's what requires adherence to the state law, which is what's mimicked in our local ordinance. And there's a lot of criteria that bleeds through from the state laws and is contained in our local ordinance, and specifically the criteria for a parking variance. And those criteria need to be examined diligently without just a word salad of concepts that are thrown out. What ends up happening in particular with parking, and many of you know this, it's a very valuable commodity. There's value to parking. It costs money for parking, and that's the remedy in a situation like this. Needs to be more land, and it's a fool's errand, and it's going down a rabbit hole to think about what's in these businesses that are close by, because tomorrow that can change. A year from now it can change. 2 years from now, one of these small parcels, including the Cinnabon, could be just a booming business, and customers consume a ton of parking. The parking for the business two stores down could become busy, just like the Chicken Shack across the street, a real small building. They have hundreds and hundreds of visitors every day. The parking spreads out in the neighborhood, it spreads out in front of other businesses, it spreads out everywhere. what ends up happening is when variances like this are given, a 55 spot variance out of 56 is incredible. But what you're doing, once you give someone something, you're taking away from someone else. Because if the other businesses thrive, they're gonna need that parking. And who are we to choose which businesses cannot thrive? If this person's business thrives and consumes parking, maybe the other business will never be able to change. Maybe they'll remain a low volume business at all times. Maybe the guy next door wants to enhance his business. You're taking away from someone else in order to give to this person. And that's not right. That's not what the ordinance is set up to do. There needs to be more land for this, a podium building maybe, some way for parking to be on site, but 55 spots in this area where the medical building next door is busy. They use their parking a lot during the same hours, but what the next door person does with his property is his business, and what they do with their property 5 years from now with the next owner is their business. You have to focus on this property, and do they meet the criteria? They don't.
Anyone else, public comment for this? Please come forward. Yes, come.
Hi, I'm Dora Beltricitis, resident for about 30 years. Wasn't planning on speaking on this, and I love the idea of a Cinnabon and a ice cream parlor, but I'm also concerned about the number of parking spots that were described. And I was just thinking, especially when it comes to ice cream, families tend to aggregate where the business is. If you think of Jim's down 11 Mile, or you go to Ray's, or I don't know the name of the ice cream place on Woodward in Birmingham that's just a mile or so away. But families tend to, people that go there tend to aggregate and eat their ice creams outside of the place right before it melts. So I guess that's just something to consider. And then the other thing is that's a lot of parking spots variance, and I think there might just need a little bit more. Anyways, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak on this case? Please come forward.
George Gomez, 2018 Guthrie in Royal Oak. I think you've heard some really good examples of success. And sometimes we're taking the story of somebody just squeezing in enough people. 3 may be there, 4 might be there. But what if it is successful? What is it going to do to everybody else? The conflict I see being created is that if the agreement behind the property, that he might get temporarily or he doesn't. And you can't hold him to that. There's a conflict you're allowing for. The other thing that crosses my mind when you look at this property is he has an empty space there. He very easily could turn that into parking. He can remodel his building, and I don't fault him for wanting more, but I do fault you if you allow him to take the space he owns and not say, you need 6 or 8 spaces, use that empty spot for that. Deal with the issue you're creating. This is not a hardship that he's tripping over. This is something he wants, and he has an opportunity other people don't have, and that's a vacant lot right there. And if he only needs 6 or 8 spaces, he easily could make that happen. And I think you need to take that into account. And then I was waiting for some of the comments to say, well, not everybody has a car. Maybe they'll just ride up in a bus. So I don't want you to interpret that as being the next avenue. These are spaces in which people are going to drive up, grab something he hopes, and run. So he needs parking. He really does. But he has a space to deal with some of his own needs. Thank you.
Anyone else speak? Going once? Going twice? All right. We will close public comment. All right, sir, where are you? Would you like us to proceed, or would you like, okay. So we'll bring it to this side table, discussion and or motions, anyone? Yes, Mr. Wolf.
I'm not making a motion. I just want to just echo a concern that I have. The first thing I thought about when I was listening to to everybody is I immediately thought about the Starbucks on Woodward and 13 Mile. As many of you know, that there are oftentimes a lot of cars going out onto Woodward as they're turning in to go through the drive-through or whatever. I can't tell you how many times I've almost hit somebody trying to, not noticing that they've stopped until the last minute. So fortunately, I've not hit anybody yet. That is just a big concern that I have with any of these places along Woodward. I'm not opposed to the idea. That's just something that comes off right away.
Mr. Moore, then Mr. Reddy, and Mr. Clay.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit different than the Starbucks. I mean, the problem there is the drive-through and people waiting in the drive-through. If you can actually get into the parking lot, there's plenty of parking there, and most of the time I don't want to wait in that drive-through line anyways because I can park and go in and leave faster. So without having a drive-through, I don't see the same scenario here. And usually with the businesses that he's proposing there, Cinnabon, and I think he said Auntie Anne's, which is actually pretzels. Those are things that are already made, sitting there, grab and go. I think it'll be much faster than people waiting around for drinks to be made at like a coffee place. So,
Mr. Reddy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm also similarly concerned with the parking. It's the on Woodward parking, it's tough when you have to back out and back in that small area. To have a lot of people coming through, I think might be difficult. And yes, I normally do mention public transit on Woodward in this area because it is very well served, but I was not going to this time because I don't see people coming, taking the bus just to grab a Cinnabon. So I am a little worried. I think people are not going to necessarily know. They're going to try to come in the front, and it might be too much there.
Mr. Clay.
Say, a lot of the parking variance approvals have been for existing buildings that we're fitting something into. It's an existing condition, and there's a new use coming in. What can we do? There's no parking there. But hearing some concerns and also knowing that maybe we could look at a podium. There's ideas, podium structures, or maybe the ability to park on site. Does the applicant also have the ability, if he chooses to maybe take a second look at his site plan or his application and maybe come back if that's an avenue he wants to explore?
Other Ms. Zukin and Ms. Lyon.
Yeah, usually on these I say, you're taking a risk because there's no parking. But that's your risk. If you fail, you fail. But I'm concerned with the kind of businesses you want to put in and the amount of traffic it might generate. And even though it's not a drive-through, have backups because of that narrow area. So I'm torn on this one right now.
Mr. Lineweber.
And if you look at the amount of space that 56 parking spaces require, that's more than half of that lot behind him. So it's substantial. What I understand the nature of the business is he's using half of it for this, for the restaurant. The other half is unallocated, and that other half is right now non-built, and there's no building there. So there is an opportunity for looking at that site plan to see how do you maximize the parking with what you do have, and in a way that doesn't impact your neighbors as severely, potentially. Also, coming with an agreement or some level of understanding or a letter or something from the other businesses, I think in this case would be helpful. Granted, you can't enforce any of those kinds of restrictions, but the not hearing from the neighboring businesses of the use of those lots and that kind of thing is a bit of a concern here. So yeah, I'm concerned about this as well.
Okay. Mr. Gavin.
I think Ms. Zukin kind of outlined many of my thoughts really nicely and concerns. The other thing too is, kind of on the flip side of the concerns about the parking that I see, and this goes to the point that I was raising by asking what kind of uses could we fit in there that, have much lower parking requirements, is I think no matter what kind of, like even if you just left the footprint of the building as it is and just, increased, and added some parking on the side there and whatever, I think even then it would still need a variance, no matter what. So like, that's kind of the balance that I'm seeing. I mean, like, variances on Woodward are, it's just, this is the problem. It's these rinky-dink little lots that there's no room for much parking on them if you're gonna have a building on them. And there is the right-of-way parking out in front, but it's inconsistent, and MDOT could, in theory, decide to come and add, 3 lanes to Woodward, and they're gone. But that's the kind of the concern. But I do, Mr. Klatt made a good point, which is that it's this time around there's actually, those are usually existing buildings that we deal with, and this time around there's an opportunity to actually take a look at something and possibly take some proactive steps to ameliorate it. So I've got a little bit more hesitancy than I normally do with these on Woodward.
Mr. Moore.
Were the neighboring businesses notified of this, or what, does it only go out to the residential behind?
Per state statute, the public notice was mailed to all property owners within 300-foot radius of the site. So,
Okay.
yes.
Okay,
Not tenants, not the tenants.
correct. Yeah, I would hope that the landlords would notify their tenants, but fair enough. I'm just looking at the site, even if the building was taken down and something else was built there, there's never going to be a way to accommodate enough parking. And I feel like we see these on Woodward constantly. And at some point, I mean, something has to be done. There's, all of these buildings on Woodward that are either vacant, underutilized. I mean, there's never going to be a solution. You have a road in front and in most cases homes behind. So there's not going to be spaces to ever build enough parking. And, I think when these places were built, they functioned just fine. And this place, obviously, they have this lot here, but I don't see how you could make that into usable parking more than maybe 4 spaces. So that's just my comments. I don't know what I think yet, but we see this on Woodward all the time, and I don't know that there's ever a solution.
Mr. Wolf.
So I'm going to just throw a motion out there. I'm going to make a motion to deny the variance as given. I agree with Mr. Klatt. I agree with Mr. Gavin. I agree with Mr. Reddy. I've been spending the last couple of minutes on Google Maps looking for other examples of similar parking situations along Woodward. I found at least 2. So I think that when there's a will, there's a way. And I just am not convinced that giving this variance would allow us to meet the criteria that of a practical difficulty that we are tasked to do, and I can't find that practical difficulty.
Okay. Is there a second for the motion? Anyone going to second the motion to deny the variance? Mr. Reddy, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
I think what it comes down to me is that this is self-created. I think that's what it is. There is that vacant lot. Again, there are multiple places on Google Maps that I see along Woodward, and having gone down that area a lot, that you can put parking in there. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that it's going to be straightforward, but there are multiple places where you can put parking that I think would be safer for everybody. I have driven down Woodward enough to know that if you miss your turn, you have to go all the way around, and that's a safety hazard for everybody involved if you miss that turn or you jump too quickly. So I don't want to be hearing about somebody getting hurt because somebody was trying to go get their pretzel or their Cinnabon. So for me, I think that there are other options available, and I'm not opposed to the project. I just think that It's not the parking, this is too much of a variance, and what is being asked for, I just don't think is appropriate.
Okay. Mr. Reddy, anything you?
No, not too much to add. I would just add that we're being asked to grant 55 parking spots as the variance, which is quite a lot. And I think we could grant a lesser amount and do justice for the petitioner. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion upon this? Mr. Gavin?
I don't know. I said I was hesitant, but I still think I'm going to be opposed to this just because it's going to need
Opposed to the motion or
opposed to this particular motion.
Okay.
Yes. Just because I think there's going to be a variance need no matter what. And on the flip side of that, I do see that the building owner is aware that parking is an issue. He has taken steps to address that, and is trying his best to work with the property that he has that has this practical difficulty on it, and on top of that, he's working to beautify it. It definitely would be a great improvement to have a new building there. So. Yeah, so I'm for this particular, I'm opposed.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
I'm also opposed to this one. I think there's also going to be a variance here no matter what. And a couple things here. The neighboring businesses either have their own giant parking lot behind, or they also share the MDOT right-of-way parking, which again, none of them own either. It is not their parking. Everybody that exists in that block has to share. And looking at this business model and having a small office upstairs and then 2 quick serve places on the first floor seems to be about the least impact of anything I could think of going there. And honestly, if it doesn't work, it's the owner's issue instead of being what is there now, which is an older building that could very well be vacant if they decide to move on. Then you'll at least have a newer building that is vacant if it doesn't work out, as he's saying. So I think everybody has to realize the parking for the other businesses that are there already, whether it's shared or privately owned in the back. I think all of these places can coexist with what's there.
Mr. Gavin and Mr. Lineweber.
If it's okay, I just have a question actually for Alex. If this variance does get denied tonight, I know the petitioner's not able to bring it again for another year, but if he does a substantial redesign to try and accommodate more parking, would he be able to bring it back sooner than that if it's not a substantially similar plan?
If it was essentially a brand new plan set and it was substantially redesigned, we could potentially, address it. Should he want to try to submit a new application, we can advise him at that time.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Okay, Mr. Lineweber.
I understand if the business doesn't work because of lack of parking, that's one thing. But if it does succeed, then it becomes a burden for the neighbors because people will find a place to park, sign or no sign, or if they're unaware of some restrictions, they'll pull in and take that spot. And the other buildings in that area had invested, I'm assuming, in those lots just for the reason to provide parking for their businesses and their tenants. So in a sense, to grant this kind of a variance would be to put the burden of that parking onto those other businesses that had made that investment, and I don't think that that's fair. Is 56 or 55 the right number? I think that's excessive. I can't see, if you look at the size of that building and what 55 spaces looks like, to me that's out of what you would expect to see in reality. But as a number that's up for approval from us, I think it's too much. And so would be supportive of the motion as it stands.
Okay. Any other comments? Unfortunately, no. Although if someone here has a question for you, they can ask you and you can answer. So if anyone has a question for him.
I do.
Okay, yes, Ms. McGee.
Have you thought about just putting one restaurant-type
You can come.
business in that space instead of breaking it up into two separate ones?
That's exactly what I wanted to answer. So when we did the design the first time, we were trying to do it as the same size building with the lot next door as parking. And it's funny, he brought it up, you can't use those all as parking spots anyways because of the angle. You wouldn't be able to fit more than 3 spots and it would still be tight trying to back out diagonal. So it was useless. And then we were gonna use it as a patio and that would be considered seating. So even though the square footage would be less if we didn't do behind the building or the office space, so we'd necessarily only need, let's say, 30 spaces. And it sounds so much better. But now you have seating outside and seating inside because now if we got the variance to be able to do that, it was gonna cause more damage. So really the best way that we looked into it and we sat and talked to these companies and went over it over and over again was to increase the size of the inside, make it so you can walk in through both ends. So actually you're losing a lot of space because you're making a huge hallway through both ways. And then the trick was to not put any seating inside to keep the flow going because if we were to do anything else the other way, it would actually, you'd be giving a variance to, let's say, a smaller size, but there'd be seating involved and whatever, and it would actually cause more problems. But it's not, that's why I just want everyone to understand, whether you gave me a variance for 20 spots or you gave me for 55 spots, it's gonna bring the same traffic either way of the business. Because if we fit that building, 1,700 square feet is more than enough for a Cinnabon. It's well over enough. So if we went to 2,800 because we're fitting the Aunt Annie's in the corner, it's just additional product and we're using more open space for hallway. So we're counting those as parking spots because we're supposed to be adding tables for all that space, which we're not. So I just want the board to make sure they understand that even if we made this a quarter of the size, we could never increase parking to the side of the building. We can never make more parking spots behind us because the other 2 buildings own everything. And the Colt Center bought 2 houses behind them and knocked them down. That's why they have so much parking back there. And there's no way for us to even possibly do something like that. So to work with that, whatever business we put into that section, we would never be able to give more than 6 spots or 7 spots. So that's what that building will either look conformed between 2 full buildings and would take up the whole space, or you'd have just an alleyway that you couldn't really park through, but you can drive through, which would probably cause more traffic concerns. That's what we talked about with the architect. It would kind of be confusing and people would be trying to come through the back. Other people would be trying to come through the front. There's no way to go through. So we just figured expand the building size, leave it more open, and then just the same 2 businesses, whether it was that 1,600 square feet or 2,800 square feet. So that way it was more for aesthetics than parking, but it increased parking. So that's what I want you guys to understand. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments we have? Comments? No? Yes? No? Well, I'm torn on this. Because in the end, I feel bad for the landowner. He's trying to make something that doesn't look nicer, liven up Woodward a little bit better, give an option to make himself money as well as give himself a newer place in that same location. However, at the same time, I do agree with many of the statements that have been said. And in going through the non-use variances, we're supposed to be, if all 4 requirements met, granting the variance. And in my opinion, not all 4 get met here, so therefore I'm agreeing with denying it. This chapter restrictions unreasonably prevent the owner from using that property from permitted use. He's currently an office right now. He could expand that office and keep that same thing. Yes, maybe he needs a few more spots, but that's using the same use it's already done, and an office use is a lot less intensive than a restaurant, even if it is a grab and go. The variance would do substantial justice to the applicant as well as the other property owners. and a lesser relaxation to the request would not give substantial relief to the owner of the property or the consistent with the other property owners. This definitely, if we grant him this, it would definitely give him justice, and if his business is very successful, it could very much hurt the other owners. Unfortunately, that's a knock against him and reason why to go along with denying the variance. The plight of the landowner is due to the unique circumstances of the property. I do agree with that. Because it's Woodward and the lack of parking, he can't control over that. And that again goes with the alleged hardship not being created by anyone personally present in the interest of the property. Partially, again, it's Woodward. He's stuck with what the parking is. However, unfortunately, he could have came to us with any number of other businesses that are less intense other than a restaurant, even it being a grab and go. Anything, even a retail, would have been less parking needed than what he needs. So that's sort of the problem with him coming forced getting the office and the restaurant. So because he didn't meet all 4 non-use variances, I have to unfortunately agree with denying the variances as requested. So that's my thoughts. So if there's no other comments, we'll move forward to vote, which is to deny the variances as requested. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. 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 All opposed? All right. The motion to deny all the variances has passed. I'm sorry, sir. You can get with staff if you have any questions as to whether or not how to proceed afterwards another day. All right. Let's see. That's it for new business. Other business, Mr. Murphy, I think you had something.
Just a general announcement that we made also at the Planning Commission meeting that the draft master plan is now available at planroyaloak.com. And you can follow it there, and there'll be upcoming special Planning Commission meetings, and we'll be getting the word out about the document and the stage we're at and stages to move forward with approval for a new master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Any other business on that? Okay, then we will move on to general public comment. Please come up one at a time. Remember, you only have 3 minutes to, I don't care who comes first, ladies first or whoever wants to.
Cheryl Sanchina again. There's 2 parts to this request. One is to have an item placed on the agenda for reconsideration and rescinding the prior approval from last month on the 11-story building on Lafayette. This board, like any board, has the discretion to put an item on the agenda and has the discretion to rescind or reconsider a prior decision. Second, the Roberts rules also give you that discretion, but we, because we wrote letters, myself, we have standing and you are required to put our item on the agenda. The zoning ordinance cannot be complied with unless the item is placed on the agenda. It specifically talks about the right for aggrieved parties to seek the reconsideration or rescission or reversal. It's all in the zoning ordinance. It was disappointing this is not on the agenda already, because that's another form of notice where other people may have seen an agenda and come out to speak. There are people here that want to speak about this, but you would have more. One of the procedural flaws was when this matter was adjourned from May to June, the May memorandum was reproduced on the June agenda with 1 extra page that said, the petitioner hasn't submitted any extra or additional materials. Everything is the same. But surprisingly, a day or 2 before the zoning board meeting, on documents dated that way, there becomes a so-called parking study, which I believe is not a study. It's merely a compilation of parking data, and a memorandum that tries to summarize the criteria in a way that's favorable for the petitioner. People didn't read that. We thought that I was asked questions about this. There's no way this can be granted. I'm not going. Why should you go? There's not even an argument about the criteria. Later I found out, yeah, the board voted 5-4 and granted this based on the late arrival of evidence. We were lulled by a mistake from the planning department when they published a memo saying there's no additional evidence. The parking study is not a study. The city has a library full of parking studies that are real parking studies you have access to, and you could also ask for an update if you need it. A parking study that has been ongoing in the downtown area shows chronic deficits. They examine every parcel in the downtown, the square footage, the uses on those parcels, and what kind of parking is needed for a downtown area our size with the uses. All we have now and presented to you is a document that shows in a window period of time, there's less customers in the downtown than there used to be. Who's gonna use that parking if customers come back? Are you gonna deny businesses that are closed or other businesses that are operating? Can I just have another minute?
No, unfortunately not. You only 3 minutes for
What
public
business
comment.
are you gonna deny the opportunity if the economy changes,
Mr.
that they
Sherman,
can
you
have
please
parking
let
for their
other people
employees
have a
and
chance
customers?
to speak, sir? Thank you.
So I'm just asking you to
Please
vote
let
and put this
other
on the agenda. That's
Please
the
let other
request.
public comment.
If you vote and put it on the agenda, then everyone can have
Sorry,
their
sir.
3 minutes.
Please, can you let other people speak? Thank you. All right. Anyone else for public comment? You may come forward.
You're welcome to hold it.
Just stand right here. That's good.
Thank you. You want everybody else
Right
to
there,
see it?
that's good.
Can they see it?
No, right here. That's good, thank you. Good evening, Trish Oliver, 40-year resident of Royal Oak. First of all, I'd like to say a very sincere thank you for the common sense shared by the 4 ZBA members who voted no to waiving the entire parking requirement for the proposed 11-story development at 505 South Lafayette. Specifically, thank you to Nancy Robinson, who said, I think it's too small of a piece of a property for too big of a project. It obviously is. Thank you to Deborah Zukin, who said this particular lot is just too small and there's absolutely no parking provided. She is 100% correct on both counts. Thank you to Isaac Wolf, who reiterated that per Planning Director Joseph Murphy, tying the variance to the developer providing the promised parking spaces is unenforceable. This is a very serious concern overlooked by the assenting voters. Thank you also to Chairman Anthony Offuck, who stated that you'd be forcing at least one tenant in an ADA accessible unit to park across the street in the parking garage and to have to cross Lafayette in the wintertime to get to his or her car. Chair Offuck also stated that this is a self-imposed hardship that the developer Akori has brought on himself for over-designing for the allotted space. Additionally, Mr. Akuri could have completely avoided the parking issue by designing for a commercial use. In addition, ZBA member and architect Jeff Klatt of Krieger Klatt Architecture should never have voted to approve this variance. He has a conflict of interest because he has partnered on many projects with project attorney Dennis Cowan, which seem to receive variances in spite of substantial public opposition. Jeff Klatt can now show honorable intentions tonight by voting to rescind this project and admitting that he made a mistake. If he won't vote to rescind, that confirms that he should never have voted on this in the first place. Finally, the politicians have recruited the Yimbys, also known as Yes in My Backyard, for support. Yimbys seem to appear to support projects only presented by political contributors of Mayor Mike Fournier. In fact, YIMBY is funded by a dark money nonprofit out of San Francisco. They were invited in and embraced by the Royal Oak politicians to undermine the needs and interests of the majority of residents and to justify their predetermined outcomes. To the surprise of no one, the Yimbys appeared at the last meeting to support a project that doesn't even pretend to have one affordable housing unit, but is represented by the mayor's biggest political contributor. In fact, when questioned about their rental rates, both Attorney Cowan and the developer disingenuously professed that they didn't know their own rental rates at this point. No one believed that they could not give at least a range as to what they would charge. You must vote to rescind this variance tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you may come forward.
Thank you. Bill Harrison. I'd like to reiterate the comment and the thank you of those who voted against this last time. I was a former member of the DDA for 3 terms, and I was kind of the parking guru of that group. I'm also a registered engineer, worked for 57 years with a architect and engineering planning, so I know what I'm talking about. I looked, and as it was said, parking data for the current year is not a parking study. Downtown business has been significantly depressed since the March 2020 COVID shutdown and the MPS parking system that was installed at the end, right at the end of the shutdown. That has turned away people significantly in the downtown. The DDA should commission a proper parking study of the Lafayette parking structure that reflects the parking demand when downtown returns to the pre-COVID shutdown and the MPS parking system installation. The parking study should reflect the demand from the commercial area served by the Lafayette structure, similar to the Rich and Associates May 2006 parking study regarding the original Center Street structure and the 6th and Main service lot. That's when we were considering whether we would tear down that structure or buy the 6th and Main surface structure. Parking is all about perception. A parking structure is perceived to be full when 85% to 90% occupied. The Lafayette structure has 500 spaces. I spoke to the person at Parkwright just to confirm those 500 spaces, because you remember the city only accounts for 480 or so. Anyway, she told me that there are 500 spaces, but 20 to 30 spaces are not usable at any one time because of maintenance. People do not want to be forced to park on the upper deck, particularly in the winter. And if they're continually showing up and having to go up to the upper deck, they're going to say, that parking structure is always full. I'm not going to park there. Me for one. The upper deck has 132 spaces. I counted them. So the net available spaces within the structure is 348, with per Parkwright minimum of 20 spaces out of service for maintenance. The parking structure is perceived. See, there you are. We're down with I don't even have. Let me just put one line. The conclusion, based on an analysis of what was called a parking structure, there are only 84 to 81 spaces currently with the depressed economic conditions downtown. Bad decision.
Thank you. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Randall Cole. I am a resident of Royal Oak. I moved here 5 years ago. I moved here after being in Bloomfield Hills for 20 years, wanted to be in an urban environment. It's been a rocky move here. Moved here in 2019, right before COVID. Then we have the parking fiasco with the new parking meters. Then the variance for the Baker College that is right just to the west of us, and now this variance, which I'm here tonight to ask that the variance you reconsider that request. I am an attorney. I still practice in Bloomfield Hills. I don't do land use, and I could not be at the prior meeting. So I submitted a 5-page letter with the help of our land use department and practice area on May 3rd to this committee, outlining the standards that Mr. Off and Mr. Gavin have appropriately pointed out on whether or not a variance should be granted. And just from what I've heard here tonight, I know Mr. Klatt and Mr. Lineweber were voicing concerns about the variances today, about the spillover into neighboring neighborhoods if variances aren't granted. And then I also heard from Mr. Reddy too, kind of shock and surprise about the concern in granting 55 variances for parking spaces where the one that you approved was 81 parking spaces. So tonight, I request again that you revisit this, and there are 4 criteria that you should look at. All 4 of those criteria have to be met. And if you look at just 2 of them, was there consideration for a lesser relaxation? So instead of saying, yes, we'll grant the variance for 80 spots, we'll grant the variance for 40. Was that considered? I don't think so. And the last point, and so for that reason alone, it could be denied. The second most important one, the alleged hardship here was created or is going to be created by the owner of the property. This office space has been functioning for years and years, so the alleged hardship is created by the applicant. Michigan law is clear that the applicant, if the problem is self-created, that's not a reason to grant the variance. In closing, again, I request that you can reconsider the variance. I know this isn't a question and answer period, and I respect that. However, if this matter does move to litigation, evidentiary and deposition questions will be taken and answers given at that time. So I'd rather have the answers now clear, a clear understanding for the public as to why this variance is granted or denied, and hopefully you'll reconsider all the facts of this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person to speak. Please come forward.
So I just have some notes here because I've never done this either, but I just wanted to say my name is David Faraj and I own a condo in the 5th building since 2019. I'm employed by the Department of Defense and I work from home for over 40 hours a week. I'm constantly looking out of this window, and if Royal Oak Music Theater has an event or it's the weekend, as the gentleman said, that Lafayette structure has 500 spaces. The structure is completely full and people are parking all over the place. Also, I read that 82 spaces were waived for Baker. To waive another 81 in that area, where are these people going to actually park? So that's all I had to say. That's it.
Thank you. Next person, please come forward.
Good evening, Jean Sarnacki, 802 West 4th Street. I'm also asking that you reconsider your granting of the 81 car variance. I have 2 points. First, I too have personal experience with the 5th and area parking, as my father was one of the original tenants there. Even with parking supplied by the 5th, the daily headaches of delivery trucks, plumbers, contractors, etc., finding a spot near the building to have access to their truck while working was a huge issue that required planning, cajoling, and a little prayer. There are vendors that will simply not service the 5th because of parking issues already. I did not have a single vendor agree to park at the Lafayette garage when I pointed it out. That's right across the street. At times, I had vendors park their car in my dad's spot within the 5th, and I would drive his car elsewhere just to get things done for him. I was also offered $80,000 when my dad passed and I was dealing with his estate, $80,000 for that parking space. I see this new building without parking will create a significant burden for all in that area. Second, just in the last week, I found out we recently lost or about to lose 6 restaurants. Hopefully, new establishments will move into these locations and be successful. What about their parking needs? Do you know what the seating capacity is in those restaurants? We could safely say there's at least 500 seats there. Do you know what this could mean to a business? Have you accounted for this in your decision? Did your parking study, frankly, I would call it more of a snapshot, take into consideration these sites' needs? Royal Oak is in a downturn, I would say, but we know this is cyclical. Did this snapshot provide analysis on this? What you read and considered when you voted yes was a self-serving document masquerading as a parking study. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And remember, should this project be granted, this variance will last. So even if you realize, holy Toledo, we made a mistake, there's no do-overs here. This is a significant amount of parking that you are removing from our public structure. I live, as I said, on 4th. I see where people go when they want to come downtown and they don't want to pay for parking. I have a few people who routinely park by my house. I live with that, that's fine. But you're going to move a lot of vehicles all over the place, and it's a burden. Please reconsider your vote. Please reconsider, look at a proper parking study, and let's do better notice so people understand what's going on now with Mr. Cowan and his finesse here at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please come forward. Oh.
Good evening. My name is Elise Brogdon. I'm the director at Citizen Yoga Studio, and I am also here to ask you tonight to reconsider your decision to grant the parking variations for 505 South Lafayette. And I'm appealing to you both personally and professionally this evening as the director of the studio, a teacher at the studio, and a student at the studio as well. Having been in our location at 500 South Washington for nearly 11 years, we'll be at 11 years this summer, with the mission to support mental health in our community, our recurring experience as a small business has been to not receive the necessary support from the city of Royal Oak, and especially as a small business that makes this community such a supportive place for its residents and for everyone who lives here. The Lafayette parking deck is currently the only place for our employees to park for the length of a shift or of a full-length workday for someone such as myself. And it's also the primary parking location for all of our students who need to park for 1 hour and 10 minutes for the length of a class. We regularly field concerns that both our staff and students can't attend our classes or can't make it to their shifts because of a lack of parking. And so the potential strain of 81 additional spaces in that lot just raises such an immediate concern for both our staff and our students to be able to access our business. So that is my ask for you tonight, that you please reconsider waiving this variance as an act of support for the small businesses in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Van Dyke. I'm also a resident of the 5th. While I love living in the middle of all the fun, very often the Arts Pizza Needs, marathons, the parade, all of those events make us find extra parking space. And usually the Lafayette building is the solution. A lot of times also they clean the parking lot in our building so we can't use it. I had my AC broke down and the truck, I asked them to park in my parking spot, but they can't because of the height of the truck, so they have to park on the street. I have 2 kids who drive, and I only have 2 parking spots, so they usually have to park on the street. So I'm also asking to change that variance and not allow more parking or, waive that variance. Thank you.
I think I saw her. Yeah. Whoever wants to come up first next. It's okay. Take your time. The podium's not going to go anywhere.
Nancy Poprovsky, concerned citizen. I'm asking the 5 board votes that waived 81 parking spots at 505 Lafayette to amend their vote for the better good of Royal Oak and its citizens. The vote of no permanent parking on the premises is a direct, non-inclusive vote for people with mobility challenges. This yes vote says you can't live here with any mobility challenge, and we won't try to accommodate you by having some parking on the premises. I've been attending city meetings for 36 years. I find it scary that the new trend is not to accommodate people with challenges. What about the businesses close by, like Stagecrafters, with almost 70 years of culturally serving the community at bargain-priced A1 entertainment? I find it very disrespectful and uncaring to treat long-standing businesses who survived economic hardships, COVID, etc., as second-class citizens. This yes vote shows total favoritism to a new establishment that chose their own hardship with no parking plans. They knew what they purchased and should have planned accordingly. By giving them this waive, they are given the right to neglect their duties as a business by not accommodating their renters, etc. This jeopardizes the parking for all others who depended on this parking for years. Voting no responsibility for accommodating anyone with any permanent parking for permanent housing is putting everyone's parking in jeopardy, with no guarantee to find short or long-term parking at any given time for any business or resident. This is totally irresponsible. I'm discouraged and worried if the yes voters were influenced by YIMBY. YIMBY talks about affordable housing for needy people. The owner and lawyer would not disclose a rental price when asked by your board. The same lawyer has not disclosed the rental price at 4704 Rochester Road project when asked 5 separate times. This is highly suspicious if these will be affordable, like YIMBY tries to make us believe. In fact, people from the Housing is a Human Right Project don't like YIMBYs. YIMBYs in many cases are advocating for themselves, not truly lower income people. They rarely, if ever, talk about corporate landlords charging outrageous rents. They promote developers to build, 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 no matter who gets hurt. Developers love YIMBYs because killing land use protections allows them to construct luxury housing anywhere. YIMBYs are not housing justice activists. It seems that some YIMBYs are privileged advocates that are not holding these developers accountable when the rent prices are finally revealed after the fact at non-affordable prices. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Phyllis Salter, add me to everything you just heard. Okay. So every time I see the rendering of the master plan representing the subject area, I can't help but to think of Gotham City Tower, which actually has some artistic figures, but also much of the darkness, which is growing in our city. Some of the other newer structures remind me of beginners' Legos. Not exactly the class of our demolished buildings and homes. As to the subject building, some didn't believe parking would be a problem, as many will arrive by bus. We have also heard that cars won't be necessary in the future due to some ridiculous reasons. Some in Manhattan and Los Angeles have their own little planes and they drive it to school. They fly it to school, so maybe we can put a little landing on top of this thing. And since we have been catering to the wealthier, we may want to put up a helicopter roof on the roof. I don't know the size of the units of this tower. Recently, we've heard that parking isn't a problem because small units occupy only one person. Right. We shall see. The rent will be likely too high for younger people not to share, like the students across the street. It's nice to have a little fun with these problems, as long as we come back and try our best to protect our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Anyone?
Hello, Board. I've lived in the 5th building since 2017. So I've seen the change of the businesses out front on Washington during COVID and the parking meters going in. I think you guys know that, you know, the coffee shop across the street closed, the ramen place closed, the hair place on the corner on 5th closed. There's a lot of empty buildings on Washington. Traffic's quite low there right now. In 2020, I purchased a parking spot in our building for $20,000. That's, I think you waived $1.6 million for their development, if that's the rate of parking. My partner parks across in the Lafayette building. After the Baker College went in, he's had numerous times not being able to find a parking spot when he gets home from work. Yeah, so I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. That is the current rate. It's like $20,000 in that building for parking. And if business comes back into Washington Street, I think we might have a lack of parking in that structure specifically. And we're monthly parkers there, so I just hope you guys consider that. And also, our unit doesn't face this building, so we're not really concerned about how it looks, just more of the lack of parking. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Next person.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Frank Hobrecht, and I own the Kresge building, which is right next door to my neighbors at the Fifth. Okay, so 25 years ago when I bought this building, and we had a mixed-use building. That was our goal because we knew that Royal Oak was a mixed use. My neighbors at Stagecrafters were told at last month's meeting that there's an empty parking deck 500 feet away. Oh, okay, great. One thing that I really find disappointing, and first of all, let me applaud you to the decision you made about this project on Woodward. It is self-induced. But one of the difficulties with the parking in Royal Oak, you can just go about 3 blocks over to the Center Street deck, go to the old part of the deck, and look at the elevators. It says, turn around. The elevator's gone. So tell me, if Royal Oak City handles its parking the way we handle the parking in the Center Street deck, what is someone supposed to do who's on crutches? Mr. Wolf, I think you were last month, you were on crutches. How are you supposed to make this work? Sure, this new building will have an elevator, but he's going to have to, she's going to have to get out of the building, walk down the block, go across Lafayette, get into the parking deck, and then maybe have to crawl up 2, 3, 4 floors if the elevator doesn't work, because it doesn't work right now on Center Street. I don't think we're being fair to anybody who's going to be in a wheelchair or maybe somebody who's on crutches, long-term or temporary. And I think that you need to reconsider this decision. Look at this thing. Look at the actual parking requirements. Imaginate the restaurant folded 2, 3 months ago. They're gone. Okay, my neighbor to the north, 4th floor, gone. And correct, as my neighbor just said, the coffee shop is gone across the street. And then one after another, the hair salon place is closed. That parking study was a snapshot. And we need to be looking at this for 50, 20, maybe 100 years. We have got to think longer than just today. So please reconsider your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Cowan.
Good evening, Dennis Cowan, 2716 Trafford, Royal Oak resident. Also representing the Curry Group of Royal Oak, and I was here with you last month on June 13th. We want to thank all of you for the robust discussion that was made after a public hearing and presentation, about an hour and 15 minutes of discussion and whatnot, and we thank you for the approval. The next day, my client received from the city planning division his letter of approval, and he has relied upon that and moved forward with the rest of the project, requesting from the City Commission a parking reservation agreement, and hopefully to be scheduled in the near future, and other matters related to the project. I find it interesting that we've all been schooled tonight on the rule of law. Well, let me read exactly what the law is in the state of Michigan. And this comes from MCLA 125.3605. The decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals shall be final. A party aggrieved by the decision may appeal to circuit court for the county in which the property is located. Your decision cannot be overruled or appealed to the City Commission. It can't be overruled or appealed to the Planning Commission or to any other body in the city. You are a unique body, and the only remedy is to go to circuit court. You have made a final decision based upon a record, based upon proper notice, There is not anything sinister about that meeting or improper or contrary to law. And we ask you to uphold the rule of law. It's not something that you can pick and choose from. The rule of law is that there is a remedy, and that remedy is to go to circuit court. So we ask you to not take any action as is being requested this evening, and to allow us to move forward to other bodies which will consider and review matters such as the Planning Commission related to the project. That is their job. And I thank you again for your time, and I thank all of you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Gomez?
George Gomez. I don't want to address all the issues around that particular development other than I was embarrassed by the result and the way in which you folks approached it. I've suggested before that you really should watch yourselves after a meeting. You spent about 15 minutes talking about why you should not consider the empty parking lot across from this building as part of your discussion. And then you turned around and 5 of you voted on it using that as the reason. You're not listening to yourselves. You're not listening to Mr. Murphy, who mentioned to you that if you agreed to this, that there was nothing that could hold them to the fact of getting those spaces. 2 very good reasons not to do it. Not against him asking. He's a developer. He's making money. We appreciate that. But you're selling us out a little bit too cheap here. But you're doing it more so to yourselves. You spent more time amongst each other, convincing each other that somebody should take a bus because, you know, cars may not be available. That's just wrong of you. The more you talk and the more you influence your decisions based on whether you think an owner is going to have an empty space someday or not, is not part of the discussion here. He said it best. This is law. You're setting the examples for everything else that you're going to approve and can be sent into court. You took one person who wanted to build a 5,000 square foot house in a different neighborhood who didn't even cover 19% of the land, and you said no to him, but you've given somebody else 80 or 71. I'll even adjust the figure to Dennis's number, 71 parking space variants. The lot was too small. He even said himself he can't even put parking on the property. Should have been your clue. But I really need you to stop and help yourselves by looking at what you say during these meetings. That's what I'm asking of you. I know you mean well. I know you mean to do us justice. But you're not doing yourselves justice when you make comments like, well, they're only a block away from a bus station. Please stop that.
Thank you. Next person. I believe she walked up and then.
Hello. I'm Carrington Jones. I'm the store manager of the Rail and Anchor on Washington. I'm here to speak on behalf of my team and our business owner, Matthew. The parking situation has proven to be messy with the current street parking system. We already currently have the Baker College students taking up like the first and the second floor of the parking, and typically that only leaves the third and the fourth floor for us, where our staff finds convenience, and where we recommend our guest park in our newsletter and on our website. So we adamantly oppose this variance. If it's not rescinded, the impact would mean that our business would unfortunately have to reconsider where our store is going to be located in the future, and we really would not like to have to do that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Stuglin, live on Genesee and Royal Oak. Lived on Genesee and Royal Oak, now I live at Bowman and Rochester Road in Royal Oak. Baker College wanted to build in Ferndale. Ferndale turned them down because of parking. Not enough parking. Now, the city of Royal Oak is suing the parking authority, the parking company, because of machines not working, because people don't like back-in parking. So now you're going to take away another 81 spots? When this lawsuit came out on the news, all the news, local news, 2, 4, 7, talked to people on the street. 201, they said they hated the parking. There's not enough parking. They don't come down here anymore. They'll come for a taco fest or Arts Beats and Eats. But I don't come down here. I used to come down here all the time to have dinner. It's not happening now. Think about it. You're taking 81 more spots away, and you have business people there that located to this city, to serve this city, to love this city, and you're taking their parking spots away? I don't know what's wrong up here. What is wrong? It's not right. Look what Ferndale did. They said, no, you don't have enough parking here. We're not going to let you build here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Yes.
Hi, my name's Nicole. I'm also a concerned citizen, and I just wanted to point out that the Michigan statute, section 125.3604 says, the Zoning Board of Appeals may reverse or affirm wholly or partly or modify the order, requirement, decision, or determination, and may issue or direct the issuance of a permit. So I ask that you do reconsider the waiving of all the parking spaces at 505 Lafayette. And also, I don't know if you've considered the fact that if those are residential apartments or condos that go in there, who would actually want to buy something that doesn't have any place to park? I mean, I live in the 5th, and the reason I bought there was because it came with 2 parking spaces. It seems to me that if, a developer's trying to develop something that's going to be successful, they would provide parking for the residents. Who's going to want to live there? It's just going to be an empty building because nobody's going to want to buy it. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for public comment? Going once? Going twice. Okay, public comment is closed now. I believe we only have one item left on the agenda to do. Who'd like to make this your motion? Mr. Gowan.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second? Mr. Moore's hands up. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Meeting's over. Thank you.